The giant discovery at Lake Champlain. In 1968, the Burlington Free Press ran a story that sent ripples across the nation. It told how two men working on a bridge over Lake Champlain in Vermont had found an oversized skeleton over 6 feet tall with unusually large hands and feet. It was said to have been discovered at 25 feet underwater during construction work. But what has happened since then? Was this ancient giant person really uncovered, or is it a hoax? Well, to get to the bottom of it, we need to go back to basics. We know that throughout history there have been many reports of giants, but are they true or false? Well, according to Joseph H. Scott Morgan, host of the Finding Bigfoot TV series, and author of The Sasquatch, a complete guide to America's most wanted monster, the Bible tells of a race of giants called the Nephilim. He believes these were the offspring of fallen angels who mated with women when they came down to earth. Other theories suggest that they could have been a highly evolved group of primates or even humans who suffered from gigantism. So, while stories of giants may sound like mythology, could there be truth behind the myths? In the case of the giant skeleton found at Lake Champlain, however, there doesn't seem to be. Like many of the supposed discoveries of ancient giants before it, the story seems to have unraveled when investigated further. According to a report by M.R. Harrington in the journal Cryptozoology, a colleague of his supposedly saw the skeleton for himself and confirmed its extraordinary height of around 7 feet. However, no other evidence was ever uncovered, such as a burial site or artifacts, and the two men who apparently made the discovery refused to come forward. In fact, the story seems to have been concocted by a man named John Green, who used to work for the circus as a giant and also performed as an actor in local theater groups. What he did was take advantage of the fact that another company was building a bridge over Lake Champlain at the time, and wrote his own story about finding a giant skeleton while construction was underway. The story quickly gained traction, so much so that paleoanthropologist Dr. Ralph L. Selecki even launched an investigation into the claims. While he didn't uncover any evidence of a giant skeleton being discovered, he did uncover a strange stone tool nearby. Although this has been suggested as evidence of pre-contact Native American usage, according to history. It could simply have been a natural rock formation. So the Champlain Sea monster may not be a giant after all, just a man who wanted to make a name for himself. No. 3. The Cardiff Giant. In 1898, a farmer in Cardiff, New York, was digging a well when he hit something hard. What he uncovered shocked him. It was a giant human-like statue made of stone weighing over 10 tons. Standing 9 feet tall, it became known as the Cardiff Giant and quickly attracted the attention of showmen. The Cardiff Giant was put on display for people to see, and a price of admission was charged. For over a year, tens of thousands of people traveled to the farm to marvel at the find. That was until scientific investigations revealed the shocking truth. In May of 1899, the Cardiff Giant was finally examined by experts. It was determined that it was a fake. How the elaborate hoax took place is not known, but it was suggested that one man may have been behind it. George Hull, a plasterer by trade, had worked for years making molds and casts. Could he have been responsible? There's no evidence of this, but the timing certainly adds weight to the theory. Hull died just months after the giant was discovered, leading some to believe he took the secret to his grave. Ultimately, though, without any evidence to support it, it can only ever remain a theory. But what do you think? Let me know your thoughts below. Number 2. The humongous skeleton. According to reports, in October 1873, a party of surveyors were traveling through Illinois when they decided to visit an ancient burial mound. Legend says that while exploring the mound, they stumbled upon a human skeleton that was abnormally large. They measured the bones and concluded they belonged to a man over 8 feet tall. This led them to conclude that there once lived a race of giants in North America. However, like so many similar stories, there seems to be more to this tale than meets the eye. You see, stories of giants aren't new. They've been around for centuries. The newspaper report of the find was written by a man named J.B. Harold, who admitted to having a fascination with giants. He seemed to jump at any opportunity to write about them. Not long before the alleged discovery, he had written an article suggesting that the missing link between apes and humans may have actually been a giant ape. Could it have been that he created this story out of thin air? Some experts believe that if the story were true, the bones would have been too heavy for the team of surveyors to move and measure. Instead, they would have been far too large and cumbersome. Others point out that there is no record of the bones existing today. If they had really been discovered, surely museums would have fought tooth and nail to get their hands on them. Despite this, no such institutions have ever come forward with a claim, which adds credence to the belief that the humongous skeleton may have been nothing more than a figment of Harold's imagination. Number 1. The Crystal Palace. In 1858, workers constructing a railroad in the Nevada desert came across something unusual. They uncovered a skeleton that appeared to be gigantic. It was reported as being over 8 feet tall, but not quite human. In fact, it looked like a mixture between a human and an ape. The skeleton was dubbed the Taylor Giant. When news spread, people flocked from all over to catch a glimpse of it. At the time, the discovery was seen as confirmation of a theory that early humans had evolved from an ape-like ancestor. Some scientists, however, remained unconvinced, suggesting the bones had been pieced together incorrectly, or even that they were the bones of a diseased whale. As time went on, interest in the Taylor Giant waned. No one knows exactly what happened to the remains, whether they were lost, destroyed, or simply covered up. The story of the Crystal Palace is unknown. But one thing's for sure, this giant skeleton may have been real, but it wasn't human. So, do you believe in giants? Let me know in the comments below. Now you need to watch Top 10 Craziest Unsolved Mysteries, or have a look at this. This is what's left of North America's largest ancient city. But what happened to the people who built this place? In today's video, we're going to talk about the mysterious mound builders of Cahokia. This was an enormous city constructed by indigenous people in what is today central Illinois. It would have been impossible for modern humans to build this city without heavy machinery, so how did they do it? And why did this advanced society collapse in a single night? Let's take a look at this great city and its origins. We don't know exactly when the mounds were built, but recent excavations suggest that human occupation began here around the year 600 AD with small farming villages near a large river called the Mississippi. The site of Cahokia would have been chosen for its natural resources such as fertile soil, wild rice, and game. However, the exact origin of the city is unknown because the earliest artifacts are no longer there. In the 19th century, looters stole thousands of artifacts from the mounds and sold them to private collectors. However, researchers do know that by the year 900 AD, the settlement had grown to become the center of a regional chiefdom. For the next 2 centuries, this would grow into the largest city north of Mexico. At its peak, it would have had more than 40,000 inhabitants, making it larger than London or Paris at the time. Today, this historic city is part of the UNESCO World Heritage List, and the most impressive remnants can be found at the confluence of the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. Here, we see the remains of Monk's Mound, the largest earthen pyramid in North America. It reaches 100 feet high and covers 14 acres at the base. To put this into perspective, if you stacked 2 million 8-foot by 4-foot wooden blocks on top of each other, you would still fall short of reaching the height of Monk's Mound. It's believed that these mounds were made to imitate the homelands of the first people in the region. Their ancestors had migrated from Asia over the Bering Land Bridge and settled in the rich floodplains of the Mississippi River Valley. This was a land of plenty with enough food to support a growing population. So these early settlements grew into major cities, including Cahokia. These mound builders didn't just build one huge pyramid, but 120 mounds in total. They used the river's abundant supply of mud and clay and deposited them in layers. Every layer was compacted to make sure the structure would be stable. Then they covered the mound in grass seed to prevent erosion. When archaeologists dug down through the layers, they discovered that these mounds weren't built all at once, but rather were added to over several generations. One of the things that makes this city so mysterious is the fact that it was abandoned overnight. There are no signs of burning or destruction. People simply picked up and left. There are even tool marks in some of the wood structures where workers apparently sawed them in half and dragged them away. This suggests that the city wasn't destroyed by an earthquake or a flood. Instead, it looks like the people of Cahokia constructed these mounds over many years, then disassembled them in a single night. There are many theories as to why this highly advanced civilization suddenly abandoned their homes. But before we get into those theories, let's take a look at what life was like in Cahokia. Life for the elite class would have been quite comfortable. They lived in large houses made out of wood and had access to many luxuries. Archaeologists discovered traces of copper jewelry and imported goods from distant lands. Some of the dwellings even had attached workshops where artisans crafted everyday items. The average person, however, would have lived in a much different environment. For example, the Wood River Palisade was probably one of the city's largest neighborhoods, containing about 700 houses. Here we see evidence of common folk living in homes made of wood and thatch. These homes would have been dark and smoky since they had dirt floors and thatched roofs. Fires would be lit inside these homes for warmth and cooking, which produced smoke that would eventually leak through the roof. The only way to make a fire safer was to extinguish it completely before going to bed. Since there were no glass windows, the residents would cover their doorways with hides to keep their homes safe from animals and intruders. Inside their homes, they would spread furs or mats on the ground to sleep on. Families slept in these cramped conditions with their children and livestock. It must have been hard to find any personal space in your own home. When you're living in a community of 40,000 people, you have to deal with waste disposal. While the toilets in these homes may not have been very pleasant, they were likely a bit cleaner than your average 21st century American toilet. In the southeastern United States, the toilets consisted of a shallow hole dug in the ground and covered with a flat stone. Women would squat on these toilets while men stood behind a bent sapling to relieve themselves. The waste was either thrown in the streets or composted in a bucket and used as fertilizer. The streets of Cahokia wouldn't have been a very pleasant stroll either. Besides the stench of human waste, there would have been piles of garbage and the carcasses of dead animals lying around. Add to that the sound of barking dogs, screeching pigs, and blaring blacksmiths, and you have a sensory experience that would knock your socks off. So, why would anyone want to live in such terrible conditions? Well, that's a fair question. If you ask the ancient residents, they would tell you that life was good. Cahokia was the cultural, political, and economic center of the region. From here, the chiefs conducted trade with distant lands. They exchanged copper from the Great Lakes, mica from North Carolina, and shell-tempered pottery from Florida. For these luxuries, they likely traded agricultural goods such as corn, beans, and squash. However, by the year 1200 AD, droughts and famine ravaged the region. Natural disasters would cause crop failures and threaten the food supply. This would lead to conflict with neighboring tribes. Cahokia was once a peaceful place, but it became a militarized state as it grew. Archaeologists found hundreds of arrowheads and spear points that were likely used in warfare. Some of these weapons were made with advanced technology that may have been copied from the nomadic tribes on the Great Plains. Maybe they learned to make steel weapons from the Apache tribe, or perhaps they adopted new military tactics. This could explain why the city was suddenly abandoned. Another theory is that the inhabitants were victims of the Black Death. Historians believe that this plague came to the Americas on European ships and wiped out a significant portion of the Native American population. However, there is no proof that the Black Death played a role in the downfall of Cahokia. We also can't rule out the possibility that a large meteor strike caused the sudden abandonment. But whatever the reason, the city was completely deserted after 350 years. The people took their tools, belongings, and even their houses and moved to another location. This isn't like anything we've seen in modern history. It's hard to imagine New York City being completely empty one day after being bustling with activity the day before. Today, all that's left of Cahokia are the mounds. There's Monk's Mound, the largest of the pyramids, and the second tallest, the Rattlesnake. Then there's the 60-acre Wood River Complex. This area once contained the largest public building in North America, but it's now nothing but rubble. Archaeologists are still trying to piece together what life was like here and why it was abandoned. Who knows? Maybe they'll discover something that will change history forever. Now watch what really happened to the dinosaurs, or check out mysterious ancient pyramids you never knew existed. The Anasazi were Native American people who lived in the American Southwest from about 550 to 1300 AD. They were known for their impressive cliff dwellings that are still standing today. But here's what no one understands. Where did they go? One day they were there, and then the next day they were gone. It's like they just vanished into thin air. And yes, archaeologists have found evidence that shows that they literally packed up and left one day, but there is no explanation as to why. These people were living in the Four Corners region of the Southwest, where today you can find the states of Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, all meeting at one spot. This area was and still is very isolated. There weren't any major roads or highways, and there aren't even any paved roads leading into many of these archaeological sites today. So, if the Anasazi vanished without a trace, how did archaeologists discover their cliff dwellings in the first place? The Anasazi built their homes into the sides of cliffs, which may have been an attempt to protect themselves from enemies, but could also have been done out of necessity due to the dry desert climate. There wasn't much wood available in this area, so they had to make do with what they had, which was stone and clay. These structures were pretty advanced for the time period in which they were built. And although we don't know for sure, historians believe that these buildings were used for both religious and community purposes too, not just homes for families. Some of these dwellings are still standing today, such as the ones at Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, and Canyon de Chelly. If you look at the pictures of these places, you might think, wow, this looks amazing. I wish I could visit. Well, actually, you can't go inside any of these buildings or even touch them. Most of these sites are preserved exactly as they were found, and touching or moving anything would be considered extremely disrespectful. Also, some of these areas are sacred Native American burial grounds, so they're off-limits for that reason. Chaco Canyon has about 400 rooms spread out over 50 structures, while Mesa Verde has nearly 6,000 rooms spread out over 500 structures. The entire area covered by these buildings is so vast that there's really no way a person could explore it all in just one visit. In fact, Chaco Canyon alone was likely big enough to support several thousand people at once. That's a lot of people living together in the middle of nowhere, thousands of years ago. But despite being so well preserved, most of the artifacts that archaeologists have found here tell us little about the lives of the people who once lived here. The Anasazi were pretty crafty when it came to hiding their treasures, which means that what we have learned about them comes mostly from studying the structures they built and the few belongings they accidentally left behind. But these dwellings have so many secrets hidden inside of them that researchers are still trying to uncover the truth. In recent years, new discoveries have painted a much different picture of life for the Anasazi people than historians had previously believed. For example, scientists recently discovered human remains in one of these dwellings, and after careful study, they found out that this particular individual had died a violent death. He had been stabbed numerous times and then shot with an arrow. To top it all off, he was only 12 years old when he died. While archaeologists continue to search for answers, historians are trying to figure out how the Anasazi went from thriving in the desert to completely disappearing in just a few decades. Archaeologists have discovered evidence of fire in many of these structures, along with signs of a hurried departure, like if they had to leave their homes in a hurry. In addition to that, many of their ceramic pots were found smashed and scattered on the ground. Now you may be asking yourself, what does smashing their own ceramic pots tell us? Well, it tells us that something must have happened suddenly, because destroying their own property was not an everyday occurrence. This isn't like them just accidentally breaking a pot while cooking a meal. This was intentional. It's almost as if they knew they wouldn't be coming back to live in these homes again, so they wanted to destroy them before leaving. When studying the pottery, archaeologists noticed that the shards they found near the surface were much more fragmented than the shards buried deeper in the soil. This led researchers to conclude that the residents of these dwellings didn't just abandon their homes, they actually destroyed them shortly before leaving. But why? What could have caused them to turn against their own homes? There are a few theories out there, but so far none of them have been confirmed. It could have been a drought, a flood, an earthquake, invaders from another tribe, or maybe they were attacked by a mysterious force that no one knows about. Some believe that the Anasazi didn't just pack up and leave or destroy their own homes. Instead, they stepped through a portal and ended up somewhere else. And no, I am not talking about a portal in the traditional sense, like a doorway or a space-time continuum. I mean that the Anasazi somehow managed to magically teleport themselves to another location. Before I explain what I mean by that, let me explain why archaeologists even think that this is a possibility. We already mentioned the lack of evidence, right? There are no written records telling us what happened to these people. All we have are their abandoned homes and a few random artifacts. So researchers have been left to use their imaginations to fill in the gaps. However, archaeologists have come across objects that tell us the Anasazi were spiritual people. They often depicted their gods and other supernatural beings in their artwork, and these deities were sometimes shown with geometric shapes behind them. Now, some archaeologists say these geometric shapes resemble modern-day optical illusions called apparent motion figures, which can be seen by staring at a simple design. If the Anasazi created these paintings to represent deities, then perhaps they believed those gods were able to bend the laws of physics, including the ability to travel through space via portals or wormholes. And here's something else that makes us wonder if the Anasazi used magic. Scientists have found corn kernels dating back about 1,000 years. They examined the chemical composition and concluded that this corn grew somewhere else in North America, 1,000 miles away. How did the Anasazi get their hands on this foreign corn? They couldn't have just walked there, picked the corn, and walked back in one day because it would have taken them 3 weeks to get there and 3 weeks to get back. Back then, there were no cars or trains or airplanes, so they would have had to walk the entire way. Yet somehow these primitive people transported the seeds hundreds of miles away, planted them, and harvested them. So either they created some sort of magical elixir that allowed them to travel great distances in a short amount of time, or they simply stepped through a portal. But if they really did have this kind of technology, why don't we have proof of it today? Well, it's possible that the Anasazi didn't leave any physical traces of their travels because they never planned on returning to the places they visited. Maybe they thought each trip through the portal would send them to a different location, so they didn't bother saving their steps. Or maybe someone else destroyed any remaining evidence. The Anasazi were thriving in the desert long before the Mayans and the Aztecs came to power. And depending on when the Anasazi disappeared, it's possible that one of these civilizations wiped out their memory from existence. We know that the Spanish conquistadors tried to erase evidence of the Aztecs and the Mayans, taking credit for their inventions and achievements. It's entirely possible that the conquistadors did the same thing to the Anasazi, or maybe it was the Mayans or the Aztecs who did the erasing. It's unclear if the Anasazi interacted with other ancient societies, but if they did, then it's very possible that the knowledge of portals or wormholes stayed with whoever erased their memory. There's another theory that says the Anasazi were attacked by extraterrestrials. Some say that when the Anasazi vanished, they were abducted by aliens who took them aboard their spaceship and flew them to another planet. This doesn't seem far-fetched when you consider all the strange things happening in the world today. There have been countless reports of UFO sightings, alien encounters, and government cover-ups, and who's to say that this stuff didn't happen 1,000 years ago? In fact, there's evidence that ancient cultures around the world reported seeing objects in the sky that we would recognize as spaceships today. And although there's no evidence that aliens visited Earth in the distant past, there are plenty of cases showing that they're visiting right now. But if aliens really are visiting our planet today, why don't we have proof of it? Well, that's a great question. Let me know what you think happened to the Anasazi. Did they vanish into another world? Were they taken off by aliens, or did they simply die out like all the dinosaurs? Let me know your thoughts, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out one of the ones that's on your screen right now. Thanks for watching. This is America's Stonehenge. And here in New Hampshire, a group of ancient stones sit silently on a hilltop overlooking the surrounding forest. For thousands of years, it's been watching over us, patiently waiting for someone to discover its secrets. But what are those secrets? And who put this place together in the first place? What we do know is that these stones are perfectly aligned with certain stars in the night sky. And if you understand the science behind the alignments, you might be able to understand how these people thought of themselves as gods. Welcome back, everyone. Here we explore the hidden history of ancient civilizations and the forgotten mysteries of our past. Join us as we look at one of the most fascinating sites in all of America, America's Stonehenge. Stonehenge is one of the most famous places in the world. It's a mystery that's baffled experts for centuries. Built thousands of years ago, this ring of standing stones has captured the imaginations of people all over the globe. But it's not the only place like this. There are other stone circles dotted around the world, each with their own unique charm and secrets. And today, we're going to talk about one such place, America's Stonehenge. Located just an hour's drive from Boston, this site might not be as well known as its British counterpart, but it's just as impressive. And if you ask me, even more intriguing. You see, unlike Stonehenge, which has been studied extensively by archaeologists, America's Stonehenge is still shrouded in mystery. We don't know who built it, or when, or even why they did so. But what we do know is that these stones were put up by hand and arranged in such a way as to align with certain stars in the night sky. And that's where things get really interesting. The site was discovered in 1930 by local residents who were exploring the woods when they came across a clearing filled with large rocks. At first, they thought nothing of it, but as they continued to explore, they realized that these weren't just random rocks. They were carefully placed monoliths that formed a circle. Excited by their discovery, they contacted the local newspaper, and soon enough, archaeologists were on their way. The initial excavations revealed that the site was much older than anyone had anticipated. The stones had been erected sometime before 2000 BC, making them nearly 4,000 years old. This was a shocking discovery, since at the time no one believed that humans had settled in North America before 1000 BC. But the stones didn't care about what people thought. They stood proudly in their circle, silently watching over the centuries. Today, visitors can walk among the stones and marvel at the skill and precision required to build such a structure so long ago. It's truly a humbling experience to stand in the middle of the circle and think about the people who came before us. But there's even more to this site than meets the eye. As researchers began to study the stones more closely, they realized that there was more to them than just being big rocks. Each monolith was carefully placed in such a way as to align with certain stars in the sky. This is what makes America's Stonehenge so special. It's not just a random collection of rocks, but a carefully planned-out astronomical observatory. Some of the most notable alignments include the winter solstice sunrise, which occurs between two large boulders known as the Gateway Stones. On this day, the sun rises directly in between the two stones, creating a perfectly aligned beam of light. This must have been an important event for the people who built the site, but we don't know exactly why. Some believe that it was a celebration of the rebirth of the sun after the winter solstice, while others believe that it was a way to track the solstices and equinoxes. Whatever the reason, it's clear that this was an important site for the local population. Other alignments include the Pleiades and Orion, which occur in the winter months. The rising of these constellations can be seen between certain stones, providing an accurate way to track the passage of time. But that's not all. There are also alignments with the Little Dipper and the Big Dipper, which occur in the summer and fall respectively. These alignments help to mark the changing seasons, allowing the ancient astronomers to keep track of the passage of time throughout the year. The builders of America's Stonehenge were clearly skilled mathematicians and astronomers. They understood the cyclical nature of the seasons and used this knowledge to create a calendar that allowed them to predict when the best time to plant crops would be. They also used the stars to navigate and to tell stories. The constellations and their positions in the sky were used to create myths and legends that were passed down through generations, and some believe that the stones themselves were used as part of religious ceremonies. But who were the builders of America's Stonehenge? Unfortunately, we don't know their names or even their culture. The only evidence we have is the stones themselves and the artifacts that were found near them. Some believe that the builders were part of the Hopewell culture, which flourished in the Ohio Valley from 200 BC to 500 AD. However, this is just a theory, and there's no hard evidence to support it. What we do know is that the builders of America's Stonehenge were highly skilled craftsmen. The stones themselves weigh several tons and would have been difficult to transport and erect without advanced tools and techniques. It's likely that they used a combination of wooden tools and natural materials such as vines and bark to help them move the stones into place. Once the stones were in place, they may have used them to build a structure such as a dome or a pyramid, although no evidence of this has ever been found. What's clear is that America's Stonehenge was an important site for the people who built it. They used it to observe the stars, to tell stories, and possibly even to worship. But why did they stop using it? We don't know for sure, but it's possible that the people who built it either died out or moved away. Over time, the site was lost to the forest and it wasn't rediscovered until 1930. Today, America's Stonehenge is a popular tourist destination. People come from all over the world to marvel at the ancient stones and learn about the people who built them. There are guided tours of the site, and there's also a museum on site with artifacts that have been found at the Stonehenge and other local sites. If you're interested in learning more about America's Stonehenge, I highly recommend visiting the site. It's truly a humbling experience to stand among the ancient stones and think about the people who came before us. If you're planning on visiting, I suggest that you bring a blanket or chair and spend some time sitting in the center of the circle. You can also bring a camera to capture the beauty of the site. Just remember that drones are not allowed, so plan accordingly. When it comes to the mystery of America's Stonehenge, there are still many unanswered questions. Who built it? Why did they build it? And what happened to them? Unfortunately, we may never know the answers to these questions. But that doesn't mean that we can't appreciate the site for what it is, a reminder of the ingenuity and curiosity of the human spirit. Thank you for joining me on this journey to uncover the secrets of America's Stonehenge. I hope you've enjoyed learning about this fascinating site as much as I've enjoyed sharing it with you. If you'd like to learn more about ancient civilizations and forgotten mysteries, be sure to subscribe and join me on my next adventure. Until then, keep exploring and never stop asking questions. The answers you seek may be closer than you think. On the Pacific coast of Mexico, in a region known as the Costa Chica, or Little Coast, 12 colossal stone heads stare silently across the land. They are not the work of some modern eccentric billionaire, nor are they part of an ancient civilization that we've all heard of like the Maya or the Aztec. And yet, these so-called Olmec heads, which weigh up to 50 tons each, are arguably some of the most mysterious artifacts ever created by humans. They are named after the Olmec people, the first great civilization in Mesoamerica. Yet, despite years of investigation, no one has been able to conclusively link them to that culture or any other for that matter. All we know about their creation is that it would have taken a sophisticated society with access to advanced technology to carve them. This suggests that they were created by the Olmec people, But since the entire civilization remains shrouded in mystery, the true story of the Colossi is unlikely to ever be known. Join us as we take a closer look at these enigmatic sculptures and try to piece together their origins. The Olmec heads are currently located around the state of Veracruz and in the neighboring state of Tabasco. They were discovered between 1848 and 1938, but had probably been hidden away for centuries before then, buried under thick jungle foliage. At over 3 meters tall, the largest ones would have towered over the average human, and although they are weathered and worn, they clearly show distinct human features. Some appear to be wearing elaborate headdresses, and others seem to have fangs or adornments on their foreheads. Despite their intimidating appearance, many scholars believe that they are not meant to represent gods, demons, or anything supernatural. Rather, each head is thought to symbolize a member of the ruling elite, perhaps even a king. This is based on the fact that they were likely commissioned by the rulers of the ancient city of Lakabata. It was here that the majority of the colossi were found, buried beneath a huge pyramid. Other cities in the region also had their own ceremonial centers, which may have once contained similar statues. So far, archaeologists have uncovered 17 sites where Olmec heads have been discovered. Each site is believed to represent a different political entity, and some researchers think that the heads may have served as boundary markers to show where one city began and another ended. That would make them analogous to the border stones that the Romans erected along their far-flung empire. But why did the Olmecs feel the need to mark their borders? Some experts say it may have something to do with warfare, though there is little evidence that the Olmecs were especially violent. Agriculture seems to have been their primary economic driver, and their diet consisted mainly of maize, beans, and squash. Others suggest that the boundary heads may have functioned more like signposts. That is, they may have indicated not physical boundaries but rather ceremonial centers dedicated to specific deities. If this is correct, then the Olmec heads can be viewed as symbols of religious devotion rather than political power. Unfortunately, the theory cannot explain why so many heads were created or why the practice eventually stopped. Did the Olmec people abandon the project halfway through? Were they conquered by a rival civilization? Or did some cataclysmic event cause them to stop making the statues? As with everything related to the Olmec civilization, these questions have no easy answers. What we do know is that creating these colossal heads required a massive investment of resources. Not only were hundreds of tons of stone needed, but so was a vast amount of manpower. Each head must have taken months, if not years, to carve, and that's not even counting the time required to transport them. Since no tools or workshops have ever been found near the statue sites, it's believed that they were made in one location and then moved to their final resting places. This is supported by the fact that the basalt used for the heads does not match the basalt found at the local source. In fact, none of the stone samples match. There are two possible explanations for this. Either the Olmecs went to great lengths to acquire the perfect material, traveling hundreds of miles to find suitable rocks, or they simply reused existing statues that they found in the wild. If that's the case, it would suggest that the tradition of erecting giant stone heads predates the Olmec civilization itself. This idea is bolstered by the discovery of a colossal head at Tres Zapotes, which dates back to 900 BC. This is much older than the classic period of the Olmec culture, which lasted from roughly 1200 to 400 BC. However, there is no conclusive proof that the early head is connected to the later tradition. Even if it is, it still doesn't explain where the Olmecs got the idea to make such a thing. Well, some argue that they drew inspiration from the Maya, but this is highly unlikely. While the Maya did make large stone heads, they didn't do so until after the collapse of the Olmec civilization. Furthermore, the Olmec heads are far more detailed and realistic than anything the Maya produced during their early classical period. Others have suggested that the Olmecs were influenced by contemporary cultures in Africa, but again, this idea lacks concrete evidence. At the end of the day, it's possible that the colossal heads were inspired by nothing more than the natural world. The Olmec people lived in a lush, tropical environment filled with towering trees and winding rivers. It's reasonable to assume that they might have wanted to pay homage to nature with their art. Unfortunately, this is just speculation. What is not speculation is the incredible skill required to make the statues. Creating a massive sculpture is hard enough when you have modern tools and equipment, but the Olmec heads were carved using nothing more than primitive hand tools. The process must have involved dozens of artists working in teams. At least 3 different types of basalt were used in the construction of the heads, and each rock needed to be carefully selected and prepared. The ideal stone was flat and even, with minimal flaws or cracks. It was then shaped using hammers and chisels, and any unwanted pieces were chipped away. It took an estimated 4,000 hours to carve just one of the heads, and that's not counting the time spent on transporting the material. To make matters even more challenging, the Olmecs did not have a wheel or any domesticated animals that could help them move heavy objects. This means that every statue had to be carried on the backs of men. And while it may seem relatively easy to move a partially carved head, a 10-ton boulder would be extremely difficult to budge, even if it was split into manageable chunks. It's safe to say that the Olmecs had to overcome numerous obstacles to complete their colossal heads. But they weren't alone. A number of other Mesoamerican cultures also created enormous sculptures, including the Maya, the Aztec, and the Zapotec. In fact, the Olmec were not the only ones to make giant heads. During the same period, a civilization known as the Los Llanos del Muerto culture created equally impressive figures in the southern part of Mexico. But how did they manage to erect such enormous statues without modern equipment? Well, the answer lies in the fact that they started small and worked their way up. Each statue was constructed in 3 sections: the lower body, the torso, and the head. Archaeologists were able to determine this because some of the statues were broken during construction and had to be abandoned. Once completed, the sections were joined together using a mortar made of lime and sand. As you can see, the legs and torso were fairly simple to make. The hardest part was definitely the head. Most of the unfinished heads are stuck at around 3 feet tall, suggesting that the Olmec artists were struggling to stay within the limits of their technology. Every inch of the sculpture would have to be precisely calibrated so that the top of the head fit perfectly on the neck and shoulders. Otherwise, the entire thing could topple over. Due to the immense weight of the upper body, even a minor miscalculation would have caused the head to collapse. For this reason, it's believed that each head was designed and carved independently. Once completed, it was then placed atop a pre-made torso. This may seem counterintuitive, but it was actually the best way to build the statues without the right tools. Of course, this method wasn't without its problems. As the head became taller and taller, it would get heavier and heavier. Eventually, it reached a point where it couldn't be lifted off the ground. And this is likely the reason why the heads are so wide. In order to reduce the weight, the sculptors had to make the head as thick as possible. By the time the final touches were being added, the head would have become too heavy for anyone to lift. The only solution was to widen the base so that it could rest on the ground. In the end, the Olmec artists achieved what they set out to do. They created colossal heads that have survived for thousands of years. But their work remains shrouded in mystery. There's still no consensus among scholars as to who they were, why they were made, or why the tradition ended so abruptly. However, one thing is certain: the Olmec heads are a testament to the ingenuity and perseverance of the human spirit. They are a reminder that even without modern technology, humans can accomplish truly amazing things. We may never know the true story behind the Olmec heads, but that won't stop us from trying. As new discoveries are made and old theories are challenged, we inch closer to understanding one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the like button for more videos. Some of the most baffling legends from North America involve secret underground tunnels that crisscross entire states. From tales of lost civilizations to hidden entrances carved into natural wonders, stories of these subterranean networks have endured for centuries. But are they merely myths, or could there be an ancient tunnel system lying beneath our feet? Join us as we explore the fascinating stories behind the underground tunnels of Native American legends and uncover the truth behind these mysterious networks. The tunnels have been a source of fascination and mystery for many years. Native American folklore is rich with stories of underground tunnels that stretch across entire states, connecting distant tribes and hiding places. These tunnels are said to have been used by Native Americans for transportation, trade, and escape from their enemies. The Hopi people tell the story of a great flood that wiped out entire civilizations and that the survivors fled to safety through a giant underground hole. According to the legend, this hole led to a vast network of tunnels that connected different tribes and allowed them to flee from their enemies. Other Native American tribes like the Cherokee, the Inuit, and the Lakota also have similar stories about underground tunnels that played a significant role in their history. The Inuit people believe that the tunnels were created by a great underwater monster that lived in the Arctic Ocean and that they served as a passage between different parts of the frozen wasteland. Similarly, the Cherokee tell of a race of small people who lived in the mountains and built underground tunnels to connect their homes. But where did these stories come from? It's possible that Native Americans learned about underground tunnels from their ancestors, who may have actually used them for shelter or transportation. Others believe that the stories are based on real events that occurred during the Ice Age when much of North America was covered in ice and the Native Americans were forced to find new ways to survive. Whatever the case may be, these stories have been passed down through generations and have become an integral part of Native American culture. One of the most well-known Native American legends involving underground tunnels is the story of the Great Serpent Mound. This massive earthen mound in Ohio is shaped like a giant snake and is over 2,300 feet long. Legend has it that the mound was built by a race of small people who lived in the area and that it served as a lookout point and a warning system. According to the story, when danger approached, the serpent would raise its head and tail and let out a loud roar. The Native Americans who lived nearby would then flee to safety through a series of underground tunnels that connected the serpent mound to their villages. While archaeologists have yet to discover any evidence of tunnels, some believe that they may still exist and are just waiting to be found. Another intriguing legend involves the Mammoth Cave National Park in Kentucky. This cave is the longest in the world with over 400 miles of underground tunnels. Native American legends say that the cave was once home to a race of giants who lived in the area before the white man arrived. These giants are said to have built underground cities and tunnels that stretched for miles, allowing them to travel throughout the region undetected. Some believe that the tunnels may have been used to hide from predators, while others believe they were used for religious ceremonies. Unfortunately, there is little evidence to support these claims, and most scientists believe that the cave was simply used by Native Americans for shelter. The Great Salt Lake in Utah is another place where stories of underground tunnels abound. Legend has it that the lake was once home to a great city that was destroyed by a sudden earthquake. The city is said to have been buried under the lake, and its inhabitants fled through a series of underground tunnels that stretched from the lake to the surrounding mountains. While there is no evidence of a city or tunnels beneath the Great Salt Lake, it is possible that the legend is based on a real event that occurred when the lake's water level dropped and exposed a dry seabed. During this time, Native Americans may have inhabited the area and built underground shelters to protect themselves from the elements. But perhaps one of the most fascinating Native American legends involving underground tunnels is the story of the Colorado Canyons. According to legend, the canyons were once home to a great civilization that built underground cities and tunnels to protect themselves from the harsh environment above. The tunnels are said to have been carved into the rock by hand and are so extensive that they form a network that stretches throughout the entire state of Colorado. While there is no evidence of a lost civilization in Colorado, there are many Native American petroglyphs in the area that depict images of tunnels and underground dwellings. It's possible that these images are based on actual underground structures that were built by Native Americans thousands of years ago. As we continue to explore these fascinating legends, it's important to approach them with a sense of respect and cultural sensitivity. Native American cultures have been rich and diverse throughout history, and their traditions should be honored and respected. While some may choose to dismiss these stories as nothing more than myth, it's important to remember that they have deep cultural significance for many people. Furthermore, these legends offer a unique opportunity to learn about the history and culture of Native Americans and to gain a deeper appreciation for their resilience and adaptability. By studying these stories, we can gain a better understanding of the challenges they faced and the ways in which they overcame them. And who knows, we may even uncover some archaeological evidence that sheds light on these mysterious tunnels and their origins. It's also worth noting that these stories have been passed down through generations by word of mouth and may have been influenced by oral tradition and storytelling. This means that they have been shaped by the culture and beliefs of the communities that have shared them and may contain elements that are not based on historical fact. However, this does not diminish their cultural significance, and they remain an important part of Native American heritage. As we continue to explore these legends, it's important to keep in mind the possibility that there may be some truth hidden within the myths. Some of these stories may be based on real events that occurred long ago and have been embellished over time. Others may contain elements of different cultures that have been combined and shared through storytelling. It's also possible that some of these legends have been intentionally obscured or hidden from non-Native Americans to protect sacred sites or knowledge. Despite the mysteries that surround these underground tunnels, it's clear that Native American legends offer a valuable window into the history and culture of these communities. By learning about their stories, we can gain a deeper appreciation for their resilience, adaptability, and connection to the land. Who knows what other secrets the earth holds? With more research and exploration, we may uncover more evidence of these mysterious tunnels and learn more about the history of Native Americans. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. A huge amount of copper simply vanished from Michigan thousands of years ago, and there are no answers. But why do so many people care? Because this is an unsolved mystery that has plagued archaeologists for over 200 years. It's one of the greatest unanswered questions in North American history. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, and today we're going to be exploring the mystery of the ancient mines of Lake Superior. Thousands of tons of copper disappeared from Michigan thousands of years ago. No one knows where it went or who mined it. So, what happened? Let's take a look at some of the evidence first. In 1845, a British explorer by the name of Henry Schoolcraft wrote a book about his travels in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. He reported finding large amounts of native copper in the region, and he also found something else: abandoned mines, pits dug into the bedrock of the earth with keen precision. They were clearly man-made, but nobody knew who had done the mining or where the copper had gone. Today, researchers know of more than 600 abandoned mines scattered across Michigan. Many of them are quite small. Others are massive affairs reaching depths of up to 300 feet. The miners who created these holes didn't use picks or shovels. Instead, they chipped away at the rock with a type of hammerstone. This was a very slow process, and it would have taken a lot of time and effort to create all those mines. But even more shocking than the mines themselves was what Schoolcraft found inside them. The native copper had been systematically removed, leaving behind only the waste rock called gangue. The remaining copper ore was incredibly pure, around 98%, which meant that whoever had mined it must have used some sort of flotation process to separate the valuable metal from the worthless rock. Today, scientists believe that it took up to 70 pounds of ore to produce just 1 pound of pure copper. That means that to get a relatively small amount of copper, miners would have needed to remove hundreds of thousands of pounds of rock. It's not easy to imagine how anyone could have done such a thing without any modern technology. There was even evidence of sophisticated engineering. In one mine, a shaft had been dug down 270 feet. Then, another shaft was dug at an angle to connect the first one to the surface. How did these people manage to dig deep into the earth and then create angled shafts to allow themselves to climb back up? Did they use ladders, ramps, or some other technology unknown to archaeologists? But perhaps most shocking of all was the sheer scale of the operation. Some of the mines were hundreds of miles apart, and yet each one was dug with the same level of sophistication. This suggests that the people who did the mining weren't just a bunch of isolated individuals. They were part of a culture that stretched across the entire region. So who were these mysterious miners? The answer, unfortunately, is nobody knows. But there are plenty of theories. One popular idea is that the copper mines were created by the indigenous people of Michigan, such as the Anishinaabe or Chippewa. However, there's no evidence that the local tribes had any knowledge of copper mining or smelting. In fact, when Europeans arrived in Michigan, they found that the Native Americans didn't even use metal tools. Everything they used was made out of stone or bone. If the Native Americans really had been mining copper thousands of years before, why wouldn't they have used it to make tools? It makes no sense. Another theory is that the copper mines were created by a lost civilization known as the Paleo-Indians. These people are believed to have lived in North America between 10,000 and 8,000 years ago. They were hunters and gatherers who followed the herds of animals across the continent. Some researchers think that the Paleo-Indians were the first people to mine copper in Michigan. However, this theory has its own problems. The Paleo-Indians were nomadic. They didn't stay in one place for very long, and there's no evidence that they ever settled down and farmed the land. Mining, on the other hand, is a complicated process that requires a lot of time and planning. It doesn't seem likely that the Paleo-Indians would have had the time or the know-how to create the mines. And finally, we come to the most controversial theory of all. What if the copper mines were created by someone who wasn't even human? What if they were created by aliens? This may sound like a crazy idea, but hear me out. We don't know for sure that aliens aren't real. And if they are real, it's possible that they visited Earth in the distant past. Some people believe that the copper mines are evidence of alien mining operations. After all, how else can you explain them? There's no evidence that humans were involved, so maybe aliens are responsible. But there's one major problem with this theory. There's absolutely no evidence to support it. We don't know for sure who mined the copper or why, but we do know it wasn't aliens. And it probably wasn't the Native Americans either. Instead, it was most likely an ancient culture that we haven't even discovered yet. There are several Native American tribes who tell stories about a people known as the Mound Builders. According to legend, the Mound Builders were a highly advanced civilization that lived in North America thousands of years ago. They built huge mounds of earth and performed all sorts of other amazing feats. However, there's no archaeological evidence that the Mound Builders ever existed. Most experts believe that the mounds were created by the Native Americans as burial grounds or places of worship. But what if they were created by a mysterious lost civilization instead? Perhaps the Mound Builders really were a highly advanced culture. Maybe they came from the same culture that created the copper mines. If this is true, it would explain why so much copper was mined. You see, copper is an excellent conductor of electricity. It's also very malleable, which means that it can be shaped into different forms without breaking. In other words, copper is perfect for creating electrical components. But why would ancient people need electrical components? According to some researchers, they might have used them for medical purposes. We know that the ancient Egyptians kept detailed records of their medical procedures. They also had advanced knowledge of human anatomy. It's possible that they used this knowledge to create devices that could be used to treat illness and injury. Maybe they even had advanced surgical techniques that required the use of electricity. If this is true, it would explain why so much copper was mined. Copper is an excellent conductor of electricity, and it would have been perfect for creating the components needed for medical devices. Of course, this is just a theory. There's no direct evidence that the ancient Egyptians used copper for medical purposes. But it's an interesting idea that's worth exploring. After all, we don't know for sure what the ancient Egyptians were capable of. Maybe they were more advanced than we give them credit for. Now, watch. Why don't we use gold as currency anymore? Or check out the real reason: Rome fell. Hi, everyone. The lost civilization beneath the Grand Canyon. There are legends that speak of an ancient civilization existing deep within the Grand Canyon. We know about the ancient people who lived along the Colorado River thousands of years ago. But what about those who supposedly built secret temples in the canyon walls? What about the explorers who went missing while searching for these lost treasures only to vanish themselves? Could there be a vast civilization of people hiding in the underground tunnels of the Grand Canyon, waiting for their time to rise again? The Grand Canyon is a massive chasm carved into the earth by the Colorado River over millions of years. This natural wonder is filled with rich history, from its Native American tribes to the Spanish conquistadors who tried to conquer it. But some say there's more to the Grand Canyon than meets the eye. Hidden within its vast depths could be evidence of a forgotten civilization that once thrived here, long before humans set foot in North America. For centuries, rumors have swirled around tales of mysterious structures buried beneath the red sandstone cliffs. According to local Hopi legend, the Grand Canyon was once home to a thriving culture whose members built immense cities and left behind artifacts so advanced they've been mistaken for spaceships. Unfortunately, mainstream archaeologists seem reluctant to accept this possibility. As one researcher wrote, quote, "No physical evidence of such a culture has ever been found, and yet that hasn't stopped some explorers from looking for it. In fact, several men have gone missing while searching for these hidden relics. One such man was a wealthy businessman named Ernest L. Coxon. In the early 1900s, Coxon became convinced he'd found a map leading to an ancient city at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. He assembled a team of experts and set out to find it. They journeyed through uncharted territory, braving rugged terrain and harsh weather conditions until they reached what they believed was the entrance to the lost city. But before they could explore further, Coxon was injured in an accident and forced to return home. Shortly thereafter, he died without ever seeing the Grand Canyon again. Decades later, another explorer named G.A.R. Parkhurst took up the search where Coxon left off. After studying old maps and poring over ancient texts, he located what he believed were ancient ruins near the Colorado River. With a small group of followers, Parkhurst descended into the canyon and discovered petroglyphs that seemed to confirm his theory. However, during their excavation, they were confronted by park rangers who claimed the explorers were trespassing. When Parkhurst refused to leave, a fight broke out, and in the ensuing chaos, he fell to his death. Then there's the story of a hermit named Walter Peck. Peck made headlines in the 1930s when he claimed to have discovered evidence of a prehistoric culture living in caves throughout the Grand Canyon. He spoke of a society with advanced technology, including electric lights and running water, as well as strange creatures that inhabited the area. Although Peck shared his findings with authorities, they didn't take him seriously. Many believe this was because his discoveries didn't fit within the accepted narrative of history, or because powerful forces wanted to keep them secret. Whatever the reason, Peck's story largely faded from public memory until recently, when interest in his work has seen a resurgence. But how much truth is there to these legends? Well, let's start with the Native American tribes who have lived in the Grand Canyon region for centuries. According to their oral histories, long before the first Europeans arrived, the area was home to a sophisticated society that built great houses and temples deep within the canyons. Some stories tell of a people who possessed advanced knowledge of astronomy and used the stars to guide their rituals. Others speak of a culture that worshipped a pantheon of gods, each representing different aspects of nature. Unfortunately, physical evidence of these civilizations has proven elusive. Archaeologists have uncovered artifacts such as pottery shards and stone tools that suggest human habitation in the area dating back thousands of years. However, they haven't found any structures or inscriptions that could definitively prove the existence of a great city. What's more, mainstream scholars tend to downplay the role of religion in prehistoric cultures. Instead, They focus on material remains such as weapons and settlements which offer tangible proof of daily life. As a result, many indigenous stories have been dismissed as mere mythology or folklore. But perhaps we shouldn't be so quick to write them off. After all, the Grand Canyon is a vast and mostly unexplored wilderness. New discoveries are still being made here all the time, and it's possible that someday we'll uncover evidence of these lost civilizations. And that brings us to the explorers who have ventured into the canyon in search of these hidden treasures. Some have found mysterious structures and artifacts that defy explanation. In 2016, for example, a hiker stumbled upon a strange monolith half buried in the sand. It was perfectly smooth and almost looked like a giant black egg. Although it was quickly removed by park officials, photos of the monolith remain online and have sparked speculation about its origins. Some believe it could be part of an ancient altar used in religious ceremonies, while others think it's simply a natural rock formation. Likewise, various explorers have reported finding cave paintings depicting strange creatures with multiple eyes, tentacles, and otherworldly features. Again, these discoveries have been dismissed by mainstream scholars who claim they are nothing more than wishful thinking on the part of treasure hunters. But maybe there's something more to these stories, too. After all, the Grand Canyon is full of surprises. Just consider the recent discovery of a 200-year-old mummy cave. Researchers were stunned when they found mummies preserved in a cave at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. What makes this discovery particularly fascinating is that the cave is located in an area known as the Great Unconformity, which contains layers of rock from different geological eras. According to archaeologist David Kilby, this suggests that the people who used the cave as a burial ground may have believed it was a special place with spiritual significance. But who were these people, and why did they choose to bury their dead in such a remote location? Well, we don't know for sure, but many believe they may have been part of an even older civilization that predates the Native Americans altogether. This brings us back to the possibility of a lost civilization existing beneath the Grand Canyon. While mainstream scholars have been unable to uncover any evidence of such a culture, that doesn't necessarily mean they don't exist. After all, the Grand Canyon is so vast and unexplored that it's entirely possible there are entire underground cities hidden within its depths. Some researchers believe these underground complexes may have been used as shelters by prehistoric peoples during times of war or natural disaster. Others think they may have been part of a vast network of tunnels used for trade or transportation. Perhaps these underground areas were used by a sophisticated civilization with advanced technology and knowledge of engineering. Maybe they were able to carve out massive caverns and build intricate passageways beneath the canyon floor. The idea of a lost civilization existing beneath the Grand Canyon is certainly a tantalizing one, and while there is no concrete evidence to support it, there are also no definitive proofs that disprove it. As more and more explorers venture into the canyon's depths, however, we may one day uncover the truth behind these mysterious legends. What do you think? Is there really a lost civilization hiding beneath the Grand Canyon? Or are these stories nothing more than tall tales? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And I'll see you next time. Bye.